Buzz. A faint, buzzing sound drifted from the depths of the dark forest, barely audible yet enough to make Mu Chen's expression change dramatically. Though the dark abyss was perilous, with danger lurking at every corner, there was one thing in particular that made people's hearts freeze with fear. It was a type of low-level spirit beast known as the spirit-devouring bee. These spirit beasts were no bigger than the size of a palm, and their strength barely reached the early spirit movement stage. However, anyone who had ever ventured into the dark abyss knew just how terrifying an encounter with the spirit-devouring bee swarm could be. Individually, they were no threat. They could be easily crushed. But the problem was, they never traveled alone. Every time they appeared, it was in the thousands. They swept through the area like a dark cloud, and wherever they passed, any spirit beast, even those at the late spirit wheel stage, would be reduced to nothing but bleached bones in the blink of an eye. In the dark abyss, if one encountered a swarm of spirit-devouring bees, even a powerful advanced spirit beast had no choice but to retreat. Father! As soon as Mu Chen heard the faint buzzing, his heart tightened. He urgently whispered, "We need to leave. It's a swarm of spirit-devouring bees." At his words, Mu Feng and the others changed their expressions, a hint of fear flashing in their eyes. Without hesitation, Mu Feng waved his hand, ordering, "Quick, move out. Get out of here." With those words, he darted toward another direction in the dark abyss, no longer concerned about facing Lu Qingtian and his group. If the spirit-devouring bee swarm surrounded them, even if he could escape, the people of Mu Domain would suffer heavy casualties. The group moved without delay, and it caught Lu Domain off guard. Lu Qingtian furrowed his brows for a moment, then his expression quickly turned serious. "It's the spirit-devouring bee swarm. Let's go." Lu Qingtian growled, leading his people to swiftly change direction as well. Clearly, they too understood the danger of the spirit-devouring bees. Just moments ago, the two sides were at odds, but now they were both hastily retreating, and the tense atmosphere vanished in an instant. As they hurriedly fled, from the depths of the dark forest, a massive cloud of blackness swept out, endless in size. The buzzing echoed through the air, making the very atmosphere tremble. Boom! When the black cloud surged forth, the ground of a nearby clearing trembled. A small black spirit beast, resembling a rat, frantically burrowed out from the earth, attempting to escape. But the cloud was faster. It passed over the black spirit beast in the blink of an eye, followed by a sharp, chilling roar that quickly faded away. Where the black cloud passed, only a pile of blood-streaked white bones remained. Looking closely, one could see countless small black bees within the black cloud. These bees were about the size of a palm, their jaws filled with vicious fangs, from which blood continued to drip. Both Lu Domain and Mu Domain's people moved quickly, but they had underestimated the speed of the spirit-devouring bee swarm. In just a few breaths, the vast black cloud spread wide, and several of their people, unable to escape in time, were swept up by the swarm, their screams filling the air. Perhaps it was the scent of blood that triggered their bloodlust. The spirit-devouring bee swarm didn't retreat right away. Instead, it split into waves of black torrents, rapidly charging at the two fleeing groups. "Move!" Mu Feng saw one of the black torrents speeding toward them and immediately shouted. The group split into two, distancing themselves from the approaching torrent. They glared at the vicious black flow, gritting their teeth, hesitant to try and pass through. Little Mu. Zhou Yi noticed Mu Chen had also been separated from them. His expression changed slightly, and he was about to charge through the black torrent of bees when Mu Feng stopped him. "Don't worry. He's tougher than you think. Besides, Old Duan and the others are with him. We'll avoid these spirit-devouring bees first, and he knows where to meet up with us." Mu Feng glanced at the figure that had been separated by the black torrent and said. Zhou Yi hesitated for a moment before nodding. Although Mu Chen was young, he had always given them reason to trust him. Despite the dangers of the dark abyss, Mu Chen's cautious nature would likely keep him safe. Mu Feng waved his hand, leading the group swiftly into the forest, far away from the vicious spirit-devouring bee swarm. On the other side of the black torrent, Mu Chen saw that several of them had been separated, and could only shake his head helplessly. However, he clearly didn't dare to force his way through the torrent formed by the spirit-devouring bee swarm. Without hesitation, he darted in another direction. It was necessary to keep a safe distance from these dangerous creatures. "Young master, be careful." Old Duan and several others quickly followed Mu Chen. Now that they were separated, he had to protect Mu Chen properly. If anything happened to him, he would have no face to meet Mu Feng. Mu Chen nodded, casting a brief glance behind him. His expression stiffened when he saw a black torrent heading straight for them. "Run!" Mu Chen shouted, his dark spiritual energy enveloping his body as he rushed forward, pushing his speed to its limits. If they were surrounded by the spirit-devouring bee swarm, they would truly be at death's door. Duan Wei and the others sensed the danger and quickly followed suit, not daring to speak further. Though their speed was fast, the spirit-devouring bee swarm was even quicker. They could sense that the swarm chasing them was steadily closing in. "Damn it!" Duan Wei cursed angrily, then gritted his teeth, ready to turn around and stop them. "Uncle Duan, don't be rash." Just as Duan Wei was about to turn around, Mu Chen grabbed his arm and pointed ahead. "It looks like they gave up." Duan Wei froze, then looked in the direction Mu Chen pointed. Indeed, the spirit-devouring bee swarm had stopped their pursuit. They buzzed around for a moment before swiftly sweeping off to the northwest. Mu Chen was a bit surprised by this and frowned. Faintly, he thought he heard a weak sound of a flute coming from afar. This faint, peculiar flute sound didn't seem to come from the spirit-devouring bee swarm. Could someone be controlling these spirit-devouring bees? Mu Chen's mind suddenly raced with a shocking thought. This sound didn't seem natural. "Young master, it seems these creatures have finally left. Let's quickly join up with the domain lord and the others," Duan Wei said, relieved that they had finally escaped the swarm. Mu Chen's eyes flickered, then he whispered, "Uncle Duan, let's follow the spirit-devouring bees and see where they go." Duan Wei was stunned and immediately said, "Young master, this is too dangerous." "It's fine. We won't get too close, just observe. If anything goes wrong, we'll retreat immediately." Mu Chen pondered. If the spirit-devouring bees were controlled, could there be other forces who knew about the Nine Nether Sparrow? Seeing that Mu Chen was determined, Duan Wei could only shake his head helplessly and gritted his teeth. "All right, we'll follow, but if anything happens, I'll take you away immediately." "Thank you, Uncle Duan." Mu Chen smiled, then didn't hesitate further. He quickly followed, and Duan Wei hurried to keep up with his group. The spirit-devouring bee swarm moved quickly, but fortunately, Mu Chen was careful to keep a safe distance, and the dark cloud was highly noticeable. So, they didn't lose track of them. As they continued following, Mu Chen's expression grew more puzzled. The faint flute sound was becoming clearer. "Young master, the spirit-devouring bees have stopped," Duan Wei suddenly whispered, his eyes fixed on the distance. Mu Chen lifted his gaze and saw a small basin up ahead. In the center of the basin was a small black hill, and on top of it was a strange-looking black tree. The tree was covered in countless spirit-devouring bees. The peculiar flute sound seemed to be coming from here, but it was so faint that it could only be detected with great attention. Mu Chen carefully scanned the area but found no sign of human presence. This puzzled him. Could it be that he had misjudged the situation? His brow furrowed tightly, and his gaze shifted upward to the black tree. When his eyes reached the top, his pupils contracted slightly. There, he saw a faint gray shadow. Was someone really here? Mu Chen focused intently on the top of the black tree. There, he faintly saw the shadow, but after staring for a while, something felt off. What exactly is it? Mu Chen furrowed his brows. "Duan uncle, I need a favor from you." Mu Chen's gaze flickered slightly, and he spoke in a soft voice. "What can I do for you, young master?" Duan Wei responded immediately. Mu Chen leaned closer and whispered something into Duan Wei's ear. Upon hearing it, Duan Wei's face suddenly changed dramatically, turning pale. "Young master, this is too dangerous," Duan Wei said with a troubled expression. He couldn't understand why Mu Chen wanted to undertake such a risky task. This place was essentially the nest of the spirit-devouring bees. If they were surrounded, it would be almost impossible to escape. Duan uncle, I know my limits. Trust me, Mu Chen said softly, his face unusually serious. There was no hint of recklessness in his dark eyes, only calm determination. Seeing that Mu Chen was resolute, Duan Wei could only force a bitter smile and wave his hand to the people beside him. They quickly left. Once they had gone, Mu Chen also lowered his body slightly, hiding among the trees. His eyes remained fixed on the massive black tree in the distance. About 10 minutes after Duan Wei and the others had left, movements could be heard in the distance. A group of about 10 spirit beasts was driven out of the forest, running straight toward Mu Chen. Buzz. The calm was shattered by the approaching spirit beasts. Scarlet lights flashed as the air vibrated. The buzz of countless spirit-devouring bees filled the air as they surged up, turning into swirling black clouds, sweeping toward the fleeing spirit beasts. Roar. The escaping spirit beasts finally noticed the danger ahead and began to panic, roaring as they turned and fled. The black clouds quickly pursued them. As the spirit-devouring bees left, the massive black tree became barren, its leaves and branches stripped. Though a few remained, without the advantage in numbers, the spirit-devouring bees no longer posed a threat. In that moment, Mu Chen shot forward, darting straight for the black tree. With a nimble leap, he sprang up like an agile spirit monkey, scaling the tree. Along the way, a few spirit-devouring bees tried to disrupt him, but he swatted them aside effortlessly. Mu Chen's speed was incredible. In just a few breaths, he reached the top of the tree. The treetop was spacious but hidden, with branches and leaves shielding all that lay beneath. Time was pressing, so Mu Chen didn't hesitate. His eyes quickly scanned the area, and there, in the thick grass, sat a figure. But this figure was not human. It was a skeleton, its surface covered by tattered gray robes. Mu Chen stared at the skeleton with surprise and cautiously approached. Once he saw nothing out of the ordinary, he sighed in relief. As he neared, he noticed that half of the skeleton's body was charred black, and the bones appeared slightly shriveled. It seemed the skeleton had suffered severe injuries in life. Mu Chen's gaze swept across and suddenly stopped in front of the skeleton. There appeared to be some faint writing. He waved his sleeve, brushing away the withered leaves, and focused his attention. My name is Tiancheng, from the Spirit Insect Clan. I traveled here and by chance found traces of the 9 nether sparrow. Greed overcame me, and I tried to capture it, putting in great effort. In the end, I succeeded, but upon obtaining it, I discovered... The writing grew unclear, but further down, Mu Chen saw the word hatred written in deep, dark strokes. This caused him to freeze, a chill running down his spine. It seemed that this person had also discovered the 9 nether sparrows' location, and it looked like he had almost succeeded, until something had gone wrong at the last moment. Spirit Insect Clan. Mu Chen mumbled. He vaguely remembered hearing about this unique race in the vast world, a group capable of controlling all insects. They were known as Spirit Insect Masters, their methods mysterious and dangerous, making them difficult to deal with. He never expected this individual would die here. Mu Chen paused in thought, then suddenly turned his gaze toward the skeleton's other hand. Within its bony grasp lay a black flute, about an inch in length. The flute was intricately carved with insect-like patterns, and when the wind blew, faint musical notes emanated from it. This, Mu Chen pondered for a moment. It was said that all spirit insect masters carried a spirit insect flute, which could be used to control the spirit insects they raised. Could this black flute be one of those? So the faint flute sound I heard earlier was caused by the wind passing through this spirit insect flute. It seems the spirit-devouring bees are drawn here to nest because of this sound, Mu Chen murmured to himself, realizing the situation. He couldn't help but give a slight compliment. These spirit insect masters certainly had some unusual methods. Senior, since you have passed, let me inherit this relic for you, Mu Chen said, slightly bowing toward the skeleton. He then carefully took the black flute. If he was right, this spirit insect flute could indeed attract the spirit-devouring bees. However, he didn't dare use it recklessly. After all, he wasn't a spirit insect master, and if he inadvertently summoned the bees, he wouldn't be able to control them, and it could cause trouble. Of course, despite his hesitation, Mu Chen clearly wasn't about to leave empty-handed. If the flute were left here, it would eventually be weathered by time and become useless. Keeping it might still serve some purpose. As he put the spirit insect flute away, Mu Chen was about to leave when he suddenly noticed a glimmer beneath the skeleton's gray robe. After a brief hesitation, he bowed to the skeleton once more and then gently touched the tattered robe. Due to the erosion of time, the moment Mu Chen's finger brushed the robe, it turned to ash and fell apart. Beneath the robe were two transparent bottles, clearly made from unusual materials. Even after all these years, they were still perfectly intact. Mu Chen picked up the two bottles. Inside was a black liquid, the purpose of which was unknown. He paused for a moment, then carefully twisted open one of the bottle caps. Immediately, a strange fragrance wafted out. Buzz, buzz. As the strange scent spread, Mu Chen suddenly felt the massive black tree tremble. He watched in shock as a number of spirit-devouring bees crawled out from the trunk, their crimson eyes fixed on the top of the tree. Mu Chen was startled and quickly closed the bottle cap, swiftly storing the bottles inside his mustard seed bracelet. It seemed this fragrance had an almost irresistible pull on the spirit-devouring bees. I can't stay here any longer. Seeing the commotion, Mu Chen knew he couldn't linger. The spirit beast that Duan Wei and the others had summoned couldn't hold off the spirit-devouring bees for long. If he stayed any longer and got surrounded by them, escape would be impossible. Thank you, Senior, Mu Chen said, bowing to the skeleton before quickly leaping up the massive tree and racing into the forest. Mu Chen circled the trees and was about to stop and wait for Duan Wei and the others when suddenly a fierce gust of wind swept from above. He was startled, and with a push of his toes, his figure shot backward. Who? He demanded, a cold glint in his eyes. He looked up and saw a familiar figure standing with arms crossed on the tree trunk ahead. The person was staring at him indifferently. It was Liu Mubai. Liu Mubai coldly met Mu Chen's gaze, then extended a hand and said flatly, "It seems you really have good fortune, always running into valuable things wherever you go. What did you find at the top of that tree? Hand it over." Beneath the tree's shadow, Mu Chen gazed at Liu Mubai, who was looking down at him from above. He hadn't expected to run into him here. It seemed that Liu Domain's people must have been scattered by the spirit-devouring bee swarm earlier. Judging by his attitude, Liu Mubai seemed to have faintly heard the subtle flute sound and followed it here, but unfortunately, he was a step too late, and Mu Chen had already claimed the prize. As for Liu Mubai's demand for him to hand over the item, Mu Chen merely smiled faintly, a trace of mockery at the corner of his lips. "This isn't your territory. If I kill you here, there won't be any trouble. So I hope you can face reality. With your temperament, you shouldn't be the type to recklessly charge into a fight without thinking," Liu Mubai said, his eyes flashing with a hint of malice as he slowly spoke. "I'm not afraid of being chased by someone like Bloodslaughter, so what's a mere Liu Mubai to me? That idiot, Bloodslaughter, must have been unfortunate enough to run into a silver-horned dragon leopard in the northern spirit wilderness, right? You've got pretty good luck, running into something like that." Liu Mubai's eyes held a trace of mockery. In fact, after the incident, they had done some investigation and found traces of a struggle in the silver-horned dragon leopard's territory. They even found Bloodslaughter's torn clothes, which made them understand why Mu Chen had been able to escape from Bloodslaughter. So, Bloodslaughter was killed by the silver-horned dragon leopard. What does that have to do with you? Trying to intimidate me with this? You really are naive. Liu Mubai sneered. They had mostly deduced the events of that day, but they only saw the appearance of the silver-horned dragon leopard as a coincidence. They never considered that it was a deliberate trap, one where a young man carefully led Bloodslaughter into a dead end. Mu Chen smiled but didn't lose his temper and argue with Liu Mubai. He actually enjoyed watching these guys be so self-righteous. "Now, are you planning to hand it over voluntarily?" Liu Mubai extended his hand again, but this time, a faint surge of spiritual energy flickered in his palm. Mu Chen smiled and shook his head. Bang! In the very instant that Mu Chen shook his head, Liu Mubai's gaze turned completely icy. His body shot downward like a hunting hawk. Spiritual energy surged from his palm, and without hesitation, he slammed it toward Mu Chen. Mu Chen's toes dug into the withered leaves, and with a sharp flick, the leaves flew into the air. He immediately retreated. Boom! The fiery red spiritual energy spread out, shattering the countless withered leaves in the air. Liu Mubai moved like lightning, his hands like eagle claws, with the blazing red spiritual energy radiating intense heat, charging straight at Mu Chen's vital chest. Seeing Liu Mubai's fierce attack, Mu Chen's eyes turned cold. A dark, menacing energy erupted from his fist, followed by the appearance of the sinister death seal. He threw a punch. The sinister death seal flickered on his fist, and under the binding of the dark energy, it emitted a domineering wave. Boom! Mu Chen's fist collided head-on with Liu Mubai's fierce eagle claw, producing a muffled sound. A visible wave of spiritual energy spread out, sending the withered leaves around them flying. Mu Chen's body shook slightly before he retreated a few steps, his eyes cold as he stared at Liu Mubai. This guy's strength had indeed reached the spirit wheel stage. Late spirit movement stage? Liu Mubai's body trembled slightly, and then a hint of surprise flashed in his eyes. The last time Mu Chen fought Liu Yang, he had only just reached the mid-spirit movement stage. It hadn't been long, and now he had reached the late spirit movement stage. His cultivation speed was really quite fast. What shocked him even more was that Mu Chen was able to take him head-on. While Mu Chen didn't gain the upper hand, the fact that he could resist with his late spirit movement stage strength was truly astonishing. You've got some skills. No wonder you always look so annoying. Originally, I was planning to completely defeat you in the official fight for the 5 Great Academies quota, but since you're just so unpleasant, I guess I won't give you that chance. Liu Mubai's voice was cold, and then he took a step forward. Fiery red spiritual energy surged from his body, and a heavy pressure spread out, directly enveloping Mu Chen. It was clear he intended to kill him right here. Swish! Without hesitation, Liu Mubai surged forward. His palms curved into claws, and the fiery red energy surged, vaguely forming the shape of a fire eagle. Then, the claws and the fire eagle merged, and he struck at Mu Chen with all his might. Mu Chen, watching Liu Mubai's sharp attack, didn't try to meet him head-on. Liu Mubai's strength was indeed slightly above his own, and if they fought directly, it would play right into his hands. Mu Chen tapped the ground lightly and nimbly leaped back. As he retreated, a faint, dark glow flickered at his fingertips. Liu Mubai pursued relentlessly, his fierce attacks forcing Mu Chen to retreat step by step. When he saw Mu Chen dodging, he sneered and said, "Weren't you always so proud? How come you're now running away like a stray dog?" Mu Chen responded with a cold laugh, but still had no intention of facing him directly. "I'll see where you can run to." Liu Mubai's eyes flashed with cold light. His body shot forward, and his spiritual energy exploded. He transformed his claws into a fist and sent a punch flying from above, aiming straight for Mu Chen. With a punch, a surge of fiery spiritual energy erupted like flames, and within that fire, Liu Mubai's punch seemed to transform into a fierce, unmatched fire eagle, howling as it rushed toward Mu Chen, completely blocking his retreat. Mu Chen's footsteps suddenly halted, his dark eyes fixed on the violent onslaught coming toward him. In an instant, his hands snapped together, and a cold shout echoed from his mouth, "Form the array!" Buzz! As his command fell, the air before him rippled, and spiritual energy chains shot out, wrapping around Liu Mubai's limbs. The sudden restraint caused Liu Mubai's body to freeze for a moment, his eyes flashing with surprise. A spirit array? However, the surprise in his eyes lasted only for a split second. He quickly sensed the weakness of the spirit array's confinement and sneered, "So it's just a minor spirit array." Boom! A powerful surge of spiritual energy burst forth, shattering the energy chains as Liu Mubai's offensive remained unchanged, fiercely hammering toward Mu Chen. Yet, after the brief interruption by the minor spirit array, Liu Mubai's momentum had clearly weakened. This time, facing Liu Mubai's violent attack, Mu Chen no longer dodged. A cold light swiftly emerged in his black eyes. Dark spiritual energy suddenly coiled around his arms, and then, Stepping forward, his palms came together. Between his palms, two sinister death seals flashed rapidly. Finally, you're not running? Liu Mubai's eyes glinted with murderous intent as the fiery spiritual energy on his fists turned into a ravenous fire eagle, unleashing a violent wave of energy aimed straight at Mu Chen's chest. Sinister death seal. A low shout resonated within Mu Chen's heart. His spiritual energy surged like a torrent through his veins, his palms drawing inward before launching outward. The two sinister death seals glowed with dominating light within his palms. With a fierce roar, the two strikes collided in an explosion of energy, and in the next instant, amidst their cold and ruthless gazes, they clashed head-on. Boom! A resounding blast suddenly rang through the forest, and a shockwave of spiritual energy erupted like a fierce wind. The dry leaves on the ground shattered, and the towering trees trembled violently, shaking off a shower of leaves. Amid the falling leaves, the two figures that had collided staggered back, trembling before they were violently thrown backward. Mu Chen's feet slid along the ground, retreating several steps. After a sudden stomp to stabilize himself, his palms trembled slightly, the recoil from the immense force causing a dull pain in his hands. Though his palms ached, Mu Chen had managed to forcefully withstand Liu Mubai's brutal assault. Clearly, the power of the two sinister death seals had finally shown its true strength. Since cultivating the two sinister death seals, Mu Chen had never been able to fully unleash them. The previous opponents, Bloodslaughter and Jizong, were far beyond his strength. Even when he used the sinister death seals, the gap in power had been too great, so Mu Chen hadn't fully grasped how formidable these seals were. Now, however, he could finally feel their true power. Liu Mubai, though in the spirit will stage, seemed to be at its early stage, surpassing Mu Chen but not to the overwhelming extent of those like Bloodslaughter. The difference between them was not insurmountable, so in this level of combat, the power of the sinister death seals could truly manifest. In contrast to Mu Chen's composed expression, Liu Mubai's face had darkened. His eyes locked onto Mu Chen, clearly struggling to understand how Mu Chen, with his strength at the late spirit movement stage, could resist him like this. Although Liu Mubai still had other methods up his sleeve, his spirit will stage power vastly surpassed Mu Chen's, and yet, despite all this, he couldn't gain the upper hand. This was something he couldn't accept. Do you think you've figured me out? Mu Chen smiled, looking at Liu Mubai's darkening face. You thought I was someone you could easily crush, but now, it seems things are a little different from what you expected. Liu Mubai's temple twitched with a vein, his breath deep and heavy as he suppressed his anger. His gaze grew increasingly sinister, and his voice turned colder, laced with malice. You're full of surprises, but when that final cold voice escaped Liu Mubai's lips, fiery spiritual energy once again surged from his body. His eyes were filled with a chilling, murderous intent. Clearly, Liu Mubai had been pushed to the point of true killing intent by Mu Chen. He had made up his mind. No matter what methods it took, he would eradicate this person he despised to the utmost. Mu Chen, seeing this, narrowed his eyes dangerously, and the smile on his lips slowly turned cold. Although dealing with Liu Mubai was a bit troublesome, if this guy really insisted on not letting up, Mu Chen wouldn't let him gain any advantage. Under the shade of trees, the two faced off, their gazes as sharp as blades. Leaves continued to fall between them, and the tension in the air was palpable. Crack. However, just as the two were about to clash, their bodies taut as though drawn by a bowstring, a faint sound suddenly came from the forest behind them. This strange sound caused the tense atmosphere to freeze for a moment. Swish! The sounds grew louder and closer, and soon, more than 10 figures sprang out of the forest behind them, landing behind Liu Mubai. Youth Master, we've finally found you. Mu Chen looked at the incoming figures, his brow slightly furrowing. These were clearly Liu Domain's people. Liu Mubai, seeing this, let out a quiet sigh of relief. He then sneered at Mu Chen, saying, "Looks like your luck has run out." "Not necessarily," Mu Chen replied with a smile, his gaze shifting towards the distance. Some familiar figures were quickly approaching from afar. It was Duan Wei and the others. Duan Wei and his group had clearly noticed the earlier disturbances and rushed over. When they saw Liu Mubai and his men, their expressions changed. They quickly shielded Mu Chen, their eyes wary and hostile, glaring at Liu Mubai's group. Mu Chen shook his head, relaxing his tensed body. With both sides having reinforcements now, it seemed impossible to continue fighting. A battle of that scale would likely attract spirit beasts from the dark abyss, which would be trouble for everyone involved. Liu Mubai also seemed to realize this, clenching his teeth in frustration. He stared at Mu Chen and sneered, "Looks like you'll be lucky enough to live another day. Talking tough doesn't count for much. Wait until you can truly crush me, then maybe you can say something like that," Mu Chen replied indifferently. "There will be such an opportunity. I'm curious to see if, at that time, your face will still carry such an annoying expression," Liu Mubai said, his gaze cold as he stared at Mu Chen. Without another word, he waved his hand, leading his men swiftly back into the forest. Duan Wei and the others watched as Liu Mubai and his group disappeared into the distance, breathing a sigh of relief. They then turned to Mu Chen and asked, "Youth Master, are you all right?" Mu Chen smiled and shook his head. His dark eyes glinted with a cold light as he watched Liu Mubai's retreating figure. After a moment, he turned and quickly headed in another direction. "Let's go. We need to meet up with my father and the others." They were now in a vast black marsh. Above the marsh hung a thick, sticky black miasma, and the deathly air was so dense that anyone who entered would struggle to last long, even someone at the spirit wheel stage. In the black marsh, bubbles popped, releasing faint toxic gases. From time to time, black mud would churn, revealing blood-red, vicious beast eyes that scanned the area slowly. At the edge of the marsh, a group of people looked troubled. The leader was Mu Feng, who stood with a furrowed brow, staring at the seemingly endless black swamp. "Domain Lord, this black poison swamp is too difficult to cross. We can't get past the poisonous miasma in the sky, and if we try to cross the swamp, I'm afraid few will survive the attacks from the black poison crocodiles," a city lord from Mu Domain said with a wry smile. "Is there another way into the depths of the dark abyss?" Zhou Yi asked, his brow furrowed. "There is, but it requires a huge detour. If we waste time, we might fall far behind Liu Domain," someone else responded. "These guys really have thought everything through." Zhou Yi gritted his teeth. Liu Domain had clearly investigated everything thoroughly and might even have sent scouts. They hadn't taken this route, so they must have found another way into the depths of the dark abyss. "Not yet. How about I take some people to search for him?" Zhou Yi suggested. Mu Feng thought for a moment and was about to speak when his expression shifted. He smiled and said, "No need. I told you, I've underestimated that kid." As he spoke, he turned to look at the forest behind them. There, the bushes rustled, and over a dozen figures swiftly emerged. Leading them was a handsome young man, Mu Chen. "Old man." Mu Chen smiled as he saw the group at the edge of the swamp, finally catching up. "Are you all right?" Mu Feng asked with a smile, glancing at Mu Chen. Mu Chen shook his head, then walked over and scanned the vast swamp. With a teasing smile, he said, "Old man, looks like you're in trouble." Clearly, he had noticed the predicament Mu Feng and the others were facing. Mu Feng shook his head helplessly and let out a sigh. Despite their strength in the Divine Soul stage, he and Zhou Yi could barely fly over the swamp, but the others couldn't. "If we keep dragging this out, the Nine Nether Sparrow will likely fall into Liu Domain's hands," Zhou Yi said with a bitter smile. "Uncle Zhou, don't worry. The Nine Nether Sparrow won't be that easy to get," Mu Chen said, shaking his head. Though he had never seen the Nine Nether Sparrow, the information left by the previous skeleton suggested that it might not be as simple as it seemed. "And it's not impossible to get through this black poison swamp," Mu Chen said, his gaze slowly sweeping over the toxic swamp. He suddenly smiled faintly. "Oh." At his words, Mu Feng, Zhou Yi, and the others were all taken aback. Their eyes immediately brightened as they looked at Mu Chen. The young man before them, however, was casually clapping his hands, his demeanor relaxed. "You have a plan?" Seeing their eager expressions, Mu Chen smiled gently and nodded.